Alright, for this video we want to have a look at a sample Form 1040 for the 2024 tax year. Now this fact pattern is going to be for a single filing taxpayer who is a resident of Florida. We've got the full 1040 here, all the schedules and other forms and worksheets that are going to be required based on this fact pattern. But before we go through the return, we want to have a look at all the other items we have in front of us. Then we'll take a look at the fact pattern and then come back to the return itself. So we've got the 1040. We have the Form W-2 for the taxpayer for the 2024 year. We've also got a Form 1099 INT that she received. We've also got a Form 1099K for payment card and third-party network transactions. We've got a Form 1098E for student loan interest payments. And then lastly, we have the Form 1040 instructions for the 2024 year. And we'll be referencing these instructions to get a look at the tax tables. Now, last but not least, we have just one slide here covering some details on the fact pattern and then some notes on some specifics that we're going to have to consider for this return. So, the fact pattern we have here, we have Amy taxpayers, 26, and a full-time resident of Florida. Amy works for a Florida-based employer, and her salary is $86,000 a year. Now, during the year, she made deferrals to the company's retirement plan of $4,000. And so her W-2 shows Box 1 wages of $82,000. And she had federal income tax withheld from her wages of $10,000. She has the savings account, which earned $78 of interest, and she received the 1099 INT. She also made student loan payments during the year, so that was reported on her 1098E. She bought and sold some Bitcoin during the year. So she purchased some Bitcoin, 0.028653 Bitcoins in March and sold them later in November for a small capital gain there. And lastly, she received a gift of $20,000 from her grandparents. And the method of transfer, her grandparents transferred it to her via PayPal, but they forgot to classify it as a personal use transaction rather than for trade or business. And so Amy inadvertently receives this 1099K showing the $20,000 payment, and her grandparents did timely report this gift on a Form 709. Now, the student loan interest, what we're going to see and when we look at the worksheet, is that although she paid $2,108 in student loan interest, there's going to be a reduction because there is a phase out depending on what your income is. So we'll look at that worksheet. The gift of $20,000 is not going to be taxable to Amy because it's a gift, it's not income. However, because she has a 1099K and the IRS receives a copy of the 1099K as well, she should be reporting this transfer on Schedule 1. And the Schedule 1 for this year has a newly added line item to account for this type of situation. Now, Amy has no qualified dividends or long-term capital gains, and her income is going to be under $100,000. So for that reason, we don't have to do the qualified dividends and long-term capital gains worksheet, and we don't have to use the tax computation worksheet to compute her tax. We can just use the tax tables that are in the form instructions. All right, so if we go to the Form 1040, cover some of the basic, obvious stuff at the top. So we've got her name, social security number, and address. She is a single filing taxpayer for the year, so not married and not head of household because she has no children. The digital assets question, she has marked this as yes because she did trade a cryptocurrency digital asset during the year. So we've marked that yes. And we will be reporting the transaction on the Form 8949. Now, in the income section, we report the Box 1 wages from W-2 on line 1A. So if we have a look at our W-2 here, so your income is reported basically in three boxes. So Box 1 wages are what is subject to federal income tax. The box 3 and 5 are what wages are subject to Social Security and Medicare, respectively. And so the variance between here, the 82 and the 86, that's related to the Code 12D, $4,000 of 401k deferrals, because 401k contributions, you get a deduction from your gross wages in arriving at box 1, but you don't get a deduction when you calculate your Social Security and Medicare tax. So that's why there is the variance there, but the $82,000 of wages is reported on line 1A, and then the federal income tax of $10,000 is reported on page 2 of the 1040. So if we quickly look back at the 1040, so there we see the $82,000 of wages, and if we scroll down to page 2 in the payment section, we have line 25A, federal income tax withheld from W-2s. There's her $10,000, which was reported on the W-2. All right, now if we go back up to page 1, we have taxable interest income here. So Amy did include a Schedule B with her return. So Schedule B, you can report interest in ordinary dividend income here. Schedule B is not required unless you have enough income to exceed the threshold for this page. However, it can be filed voluntarily. And so Amy's reported the bank interest here. If we have a quick look at her 1099 INT, we can see the INT for the 2024 calendar year. There is the $78 of interest income, and there was no federal income taxes withheld. So we report the $78 in part 1 of taxable interest income, and that amount flows through to page 1, line 2B for taxable interest. All right. Now, moving on to the capital gain. So she sold those Bitcoins. She bought them and sold them both within the same year, so it's going to be short-term capital gain or loss. And so that amount is first reported on the 8949. So she's indicating here that she did receive a 1099-B from the broker showing the sale proceeds, but basis wasn't reported. So basis is what she paid for it, right? Her cost basis. So she reports here description of the property. So we have the Bitcoin acquired on March 29, 2024, sold November 9th, 2024. The sales proceeds were $21.99. $2,000 was her cost basis, so her gain is $199. Now, once we have the $199, that amount flows through to Schedule D. So Schedule D is a summary of all the capital gains and losses reported for the year. And we can see at the top here, there is a question about dispositions of qualified opportunity funds. In our case, we're answering no because we didn't dispose of any of those types of investments. And so the part 1, these totals are flowing through from the form 8949. So we've got the proceeds, the costs, and then the gain or loss as short-term capital gain. All right, now once all those totals are summarized, we move on to the combined result on line 16. And none of these other items apply. We don't have any 28% gains. We don't have any unrecaptured 1250 from, let's say, the sale of real estate. So pretty simple fact pattern for Amy. She can leave all of these items blank. And the net amount of the gain is simply reported on page 1 of the Form 1040. All right, so if we go back to page 1 of the 1040, scroll on down here, and there's the amount reported on line 7 as the capital gain or loss for the year. Now her total income, add all these items up, and we're left with $82,277. All right, so now let's move on. We'll come back to page 2. Let's move on to Schedule 1. So Schedule 1, where we report additional income and adjustments to income. So Part 1 is additional income. Page 2, Part 2 are adjustments to income. So if we start at the top here, this is a new change from the 2023 version. At the very top here, they've added this line item, or 2 line items. So one for an entry and then just a note. But it says here for 2024, enter the amount reported to you on 1099-K that was included in error or for personal items sold at loss. All right. Now, in prior year returns, what we had to do in the past was report any kind of personal items or non-business transactions on the 1099-Ks on line Z, and then there'd be a corresponding entry in part 2 down here to kind of zero it out. So you have to report it because the IRS is getting the same 1099-K, but now they've added this line item up here where you don't have to do more of that complex entry, and you can simply enter how much of the amount reported on 1099-K was personal, and in this case, the gift, again, it's not taxable income to Amy, but she nevertheless reports it up there so the IRS can trace and see that you did in fact report it as a personal item, and it's not as if you just ignored it and left it off the tax return. So the $20,000 just hangs on up there. It's not reported anywhere else here on Schedule 1, and it doesn't flow through back to page 1 of the 1040. So it's not included in your gross or taxable income. All right, so then the last one we have to account for is the student loan interest. So we'll have a look at the 1098E. So she received this for the 2024 year. We can see here that the net amount of student loan interest received was $2,108. And so now on the Form 1040, the student loan interest deduction is reported on line 21. However, before you get to this line item, you need to complete the student loan interest deduction to see whether or not you can deduct any of it or there's going to be a phase out. So if we jump down at the very bottom, we have a student loan interest deduction worksheet. And so we complete the worksheet to figure out how much we can deduct. So line 1, we're entering the total interest paid in 2024. Don't enter more than $2,500, right? So that is the cap. So even if you paid $12,000 in student loan interest, you can only deduct at most $2,500. So we have the 2108, that was the total. And now we start to complete the rest of the worksheet to compute the phase out. So it asks to enter the amount from Form 1040, line 9. So if we jump back up to the 1040, scroll down to line 9, which is her total income, $82,277. Report the $82,277 there. Now it asks us to enter any other amounts from Schedule 1, lines 11 through 20, 23, and 25. If we go back to the Schedule 1, just to review it really quickly, we'll see that we don't have any of those line items that apply, right? So we're not making any other adjustments, but if you have line items that fall within that range, you need to account for them in the worksheet. All right, so line 3 is blank for us. Subtract line 3 from 2 to get to line 4. And we're left with the same value, $82,277. Now, the filing status here is important because this determines the phase out. So if you're single, head of household, or qualifying surviving spouse, you enter $80,000. That's us. Is the amount on line 4 more than the amount on line 5? And the answer is yes, right? We're over by $22,77. So we subtract line 5 from line 4. We're left with $2,277. Divide the line 6 value by 15,000 based on our filing status and enter the result here as a decimal rounded to at least 3 places. All right. If the result is 1 or more, enter 1. So we divide 2277 by 15,000 and we're left with 0.152. Line 8, multiply line 1 by line 7. So we're multiplying the total we paid times the factor, and we're left with $320. Now the student loan interest deduction, we subtract line 8 from line 1. So we're taking $320 and we're going to subtract that from 2108. And the difference we have now is $1,788. So this is the amount of student loan interest that we can deduct. Even though we paid more, we've got this phase out limitation because our total income exceeds the filing status threshold here of $80,000. So we've got our 1,788. We'll go back up to Schedule 1 here. Scroll down to Part 2, Adjustments for Income. Enter the 1788 there on line 21. And then at the bottom here, we'll have the total of 1788. So it asks us to add 11 through 23 and 25. These are adjustments to income. Now enter this value on the 1040, line 10. So we'll go back up to page 1, scroll down to line 10. There's our 1,788. And so line 11, we can subtract the 1788 from the 82,000 figure, and we're left with $80,489 as adjusted gross income. Now, Amy doesn't have any itemized deductions, so she's claiming the standard deduction for 2024, and they have a handy little note here showing you what the standard deduction would be given your filing status, and for her as a single filer, it's going to be $14,600. Line 13 is blank for us because we don't have any qualified business income, so we don't have any income flowing through from partnerships or S-corps, and she's not a sole proprietorship, so no qualified business income to report, so no QBI deduction. Subtract the standard from your AGI, and you're left with taxable income of $65,889. Now on to the tax, right? So the tax we need to calculate is reported up on line 16. So if we have a look at the form instructions and we go down to the tax tables, now remember, you can't use these tables. So let me scroll through really quickly so you can see what I mean. The first issue, these tables, they only go down to $100,000, right? So note here, if your income, your taxable income is $100,000 or over, you've got to use the tax computation worksheet. If you have any qualified dividend income or long-term capital gains, you have to use the qualified dividend long-term capital gain tax worksheet as well. So in this case, none of those apply to her. Her income is below the threshold, so we can just use this table. So the way the table works, you look up where your income falls within these ranges and then move from left to right to find your filing status, and that tells you the amount of tax you have. So if we look back as a reminder here, the taxable income for her for the 2024 year is $65,889. So $65,889. So if we scroll on down, try to find that range. So we're looking at $65,889. And so that's going to fall within this range here. So $65,850 to $65,900, right? 65,889. And then the first column is for single filers, right? So we have single filing taxpayers. So the 65,889 figure is going to put us right here, $9,546. All right. So once we have that value, we can report that tax up here, $9,546. She doesn't have any other taxes or credits to account for from Schedules 2 or 3. Again, a very simple fact pattern here, so all of those line items are blank. So the total amount of tax she owes for her return is $9,546. Now remember, we've already accounted for the $10,000 in federal income tax withheld. That was reported on her W-2. So we subtract the, so if line 33 is more than line 24, which it is, we subtract 24 from 33, and this is the amount that she overpaid. All right. So that's her tax refund for the year. She owes $9,546 on all her income minus that deduction for the student loan interest. She had $10,000 in withholding, and so now she's going to get an income tax refund of $454. All right, so that covers it for this tutorial. I hope that was helpful. Pretty straightforward example. Appreciate you watching and sticking through it with me to the end here, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Thank you.